Howard,
Good to
pleasure.
have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I think this, so far, how is your experience here at the conference?
It's been great. So I'm new to this. This is my first ever RealCom. So kind of cool that I get to do it when there's been a little bit of a hiatus, and I get to come here with a large team of CohnReznick folks, and I get to support them. So it's been tremendous. It's nice to be back out and about.
Well, fortunately, just about everybody got here without too many travel difficulties.
I did hear a few stories, but they're all in the past. So
knock on wood. So, Ira, for folks who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
sure. So interestingly, I'm not a technology guy. I come to this real estate space mostly through a sort of finance background. And I've had the good fortune for almost 25 years of working at CohnReznick, working in our real estate practice. And we've done a tremendous amount of work in the community development space. So I've had the good fortune of being involved in financing activities, supporting companies, municipalities, a whole host of stakeholders in developing real estate as a means to create opportunity in communities all over the country and to some extent all over the world, because we've done stuff outside of the US. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I know that you guys have been you've been focusing a lot on ESG, and in a significant way, and how ESG is connected to real estate. Take a few minutes, break down for us why you think it's so important, and why RealCom might be critical,
Sure.
To the principle.
Yeah, no, I think that, so I mentioned that come from a community development background. So our view of the world has always been through this lens of corporate social responsibility. And, we feel like there's this notion of doing well by doing good that has been instilled in the community development practice for the better part of 40 years. The firm has been doing some of these things for about 100 years. So for us, there's some history to all of this. The feeling, though, is that real estate is so pervasive to the economy and the perfect place to bring together what I think ESG represents. And that is this notion of kind of the convergence of physical infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and social infrastructure. And they all come together around real estate and real estate assets. And so for us, it's a critically important element of what we think real estate's about. It's also a lot of the history of how we got to real estate on the community development side. But RealCom in particular, I mean, it's literally written in the material, right? The idea that you're bringing together real estate through innovation technology, and not just any real estate, but both corporate real estate and commercial, which to me is the essence of what we're dealing with, because that really encapsulates so much of the economy and so much of the built environment and the implications it has. So what we consider the three sort of pillars, which are people, purpose, and planet. And so, you get into all the elements of ESG, and we're not alone. I mean, walking around today, listening to the sessions, I mean, this has come up, I don't know, 10, 15 times that I've heard the specific reference alone to sustainability or ESG or something along those lines. So it's a movement that's, I think, been around for also give or take 40 years, but the acceleration right now is tremendous. And that's the best way to describe it, is an acceleration of something that we all need to get on board with.
It feels a little different this time because it's actually made its way to, it's part of investor criteria now. I mean, the ESG, the E we've been living with for a while. We somewhat understand that the S and the G have been escalated in terms of importance. There, I mean, it's boardroom. It's actually making its way into investors' criteria.
All the stakeholders. I mean, it really has become, I think, investors, governments, people meaning clients, tenants, customers, but also employees. I mean, we see it with our organization. People are clamoring for this, and I think because it really focuses on the longer term. And again, that's what the real estate asset is about, right? The longer term and the ability to really take advantage of things over a longer period of time. I also think that the pandemic has, in a strange way, created a lot of this. I think it has given people a chance to step back and think about
take a look,
what timing and duration really means, what sort of obligation we all have to those three pillars, people, purpose, and planet. And I think the purpose side in particular is something that's driving what people want to do with their career, what they want to do.
I think people and organizations reevaluating their priorities. And as you said, it's been around. It's been around for a long time. But I still think there's an element of confusion around there. And I think about a couple of keywords that we talk about in the context of ESG and real estate and our focus at Realcomm. Maybe let's dig into this idea just a little bit further by exploring each word. So starting with sustainability.
Sure. To me, the most I guess, frequently referred to synonym for ESG, and I think sustainability, this may not clear things up, it may make it a little more confusing, but I think sustainability is a concept that people understand, mostly because they think about it from the perspective of kind of natural resources and literally the ability to have sort of take out less than you put in so that things can be sustained. But I think sustainability is also something you think about on other levels, which is, the ability to sustain a financing structure, the ability to sustain a supply chain, the ability to sustain an opportunity inside of an organization, and the ability to have sort of continuity. So sustainability, I think, is a key word because it has these sort of environmental aspects, but it also has sort of a social and practical aspect that, again, looks towards the long term, the duration, thinking about this in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a shift in perspective. And we've talked about that, as you said, probably over the last 40 years. Yep. That's been a buzzword that's popped up.
And one that I've heard quite a few times today, again, along with the ESG reference, this notion of sustainability, mostly in the context of buildings, the built environment and environmental aspects, but I think it goes well beyond that. That's just a very easy sort of physical way to think about it.
Yep. Now, what about impact? We hear about impact a lot.
Yeah, impact to me is the essence of what you're dealing with in terms of how do we know we're making progress? How do we know we're doing well? And, I think for folks at this conference, so much of it is about tech and data, this notion of measurement, tangibility. And so I think that's where impact comes in. And I think all aspects of ESG can be measured. Sometimes the measurement is hard measurement that literally you're able to kind of understand very obviously. Other times it's more about where were we and where do we want to go? And that to me defines the impact. What's the difference we've made? And I think impact also though has, multiple definitions in this context. And, I think impact is something that for a lot of people it is about the difference we're making mostly around people.
Yeah.
And I think that impact can be very tangible. It can be literally financial. I mean, impact investment. But I think oftentimes that impact investment that we're thinking about in ESG is that double or triple bottom line where you're not just getting good financial results, you're also getting good people results, good environmental results. So you're kind of dealing with that double and triple bottom line.
Those people results, I mean, they seem to be a little more difficult to measure and respond to. Sometimes they take quite a while for us to be able to see, any kind of result that we can, that's tangible. The E, fairly easy. We can meter it, we can monitor it, we can measure it. Easy to develop KPIs and analytics and figure out what to do. But a little more difficult on the S and G. So that I think that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think in some respects this whole movement started with the G, and then we shifted to the E because it was easier to measure. Yeah. And now there's a greater focus on the S because of things that have happened around the world that people are more sensitive to. I think the measurement, though, is mostly, as I said earlier, sort of about comparing where you were to where you want to go. Mm-hmm. So if it's things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is an element of governance and transparency, but it's also a social effect, and it is literally a measurement. Where were we last year? Where do we want to be in 3 years? And how are we going to get there? And how can we literally track and chronicle the change? Mm-hmm. Similarly, I think if you go into things like if we're trying to have an impact on a particular environment we're in, literally a community or a neighborhood, health metrics, effect on poverty, the alleviation of that. So I think it is more of an incremental approach to saying, this is where we are, this is where we want to go, now let's track how we get there. And I think that winds up being a form of measurement.
Yeah, I think it's more than just, taking a checklist and checking off the boxes, we did this, and this, and we deserve a higher score. I think there is a commitment that it has to be pervasive in the organization. Everyone has to kind of buy into the why and the vision too.
I think that's right, and I feel like that's happening in droves. It really is. I think so.
Yeah. What about collaboration?
So collaboration is where I really see it happening in droves. I mean, collaboration is this idea that, we can work together. And again, as a newbie to this event, I've always been fascinated. It feels to me like the tech space is particularly a place where collaboration is really more pervasive than I think I see it in a lot of other aspects of an industry. And so collaboration to me is within an organization and the ability to really think about the impact you want to make, the journey you're on. But I think the collaboration is also about the industry itself and all of the participants. My view, our view of ESG is that it's such a big deal that there's no reason to protect your sort of secret sauce. There's no reason to want a competitive advantage. There's, I think, should be more of a reason to say we can all work together to figure this out, because the opportunity, the problem, and therefore the opportunity is so significant. Let's work together. And tech and the real-com sort of ethos is, I think, what can drive a lot of that from a real estate perspective, because that really does have
I
this.
agree. It's a
this
big
angle.
problem. Big problems require a lot of smart people putting their heads together. That's one of the things that I kind of get. I'm really encouraged that I see here. Over the years, I have seen folks who would have been rabid competitors,
Right.
And I've actually made the effort to get them together, and now they're collaborating. They're working together. And that whole consciousness about operating in your own little silo and not collaborating has, I think, expanded considerably here.
So two things to that. One, stumbled on a conversation with a colleague of mine and a former competitor, and they were talking and reminiscing about when they might not have been talking quite as
Yeah, no, that's great.
frequently. But also, you mentioned silos. So there's an interesting thing in the Harvard Business Review this morning. There was their daily email, and it talked about why instead of trying to break down silos, sometimes just accept that they exist, but work across them.
Work across them.
And this idea of collaboration becomes really, really interesting when you think about it that way. We can try really hard to break something down, but that takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy. Maybe we just find ways to sort of embrace what's good about it and bridge it.
Yep. So, getting back to the E, the S, and the G, I can envision this principle manifesting itself in a building, but that it also applies to districts and communities too. Are there any examples that come to mind that reflect these principles in ways that we can think about to establish proof of concept?
Yeah, so I think this notion of a district, I mean, you've got innovative districts or innovation districts all over the world. I think Brookings tracks this. I think there's like just shy of 100 of them that are sort of based on their criteria.
Right.
I think part of it comes from this idea that when you're in a building situation, it's not just about your physical space, it's about all the implications of the physical space around you. So you really are operating in this larger community. And I think the the district notion and the sort of the more larger physical space gets into collaboration with anchor institutions, how to think about clusters for sort of economic development opportunity. And all of that is enhanced when you've got tech and innovation to sort of expand the impact of the real estate. I do think that if you look around the country, I mean, in most big cities, you have an innovation district of some form or another. What you also have in a lot of smaller cities is you're starting to see all of these sort of incubation opportunities, which all require real estate and technology to support that are now starting to spread pretty significantly. So I think this idea of sort of organic clusters as an economic development concept and the ability to rely on the built environment to really expand into the community is taking off. And I think we're going to see a sort of a geometric progression of activity relative to what we've seen to date. But I do think that that's kind of the future, is this idea of almost like a co-location notion on steroids that's better than anything we've co-located with before.
That requires a big strategy,
Yep.
a big vision, kind of a far-reaching, vision for what you want to accomplish, not only now, but a decade, 2 decades.
And I think collaboration that's not just the private sector, but the public sector. So you need government, especially local government involved. You need the sort of NGOs involved. You need the private sector and all of its power.
Yep. So, I mean, this is a big, powerful idea. It means there's a lot of obstacles to achieving widespread definitions of success. What is that true? And what sort of future could we expect, and how far out before we're calling this ubiquitous?
Yeah, so I think that, again, we're on this rapid pace. And so I think if you look, 3 or 5 years out, you're going to see a very, very, very different environment in general, the built environment in particular. I think it's generational. I think there
Yeah,
are a lot of
I
folks
think
that
so, too.
are younger than you and I, and they think differently about things, and they're focused on a different kind of future. I mean, is evidenced by the fact that we come here in droves every year. Many of the people that are here and that are speaking are younger folks that are not necessarily sort of our usual suspects. That's an important and sort of a big deal. But I also think that this is a movement that's just too powerful to slow down, but everybody's figured out that you can have purpose and profit together, and that you can look towards a longer future. And so as a result, I think people are getting it. They're also being obligated to get it because the investor base in particular, both debt and equity, and also regulators and governmental authorities are pushing this. But maybe most importantly, people are pushing it.
Yeah.
Customers, clients, tenants, as well as employees of every company.
Yeah, I have the same feeling. I think it's sticks. So, with that, it appears that the CohnReznick team is standing by to whisk Ira off in
I've
a
heard
good
about this.
old-fashioned conga line.
Uh-oh.
But be sure to check out their virtual real-com game by visiting the CohnReznickConga.com application.
All right.
Those at the conference or joining digitally can weave
guess I have to
around a
jump in.
digital exhibit floor for a chance to win some great prizes or just bragging rights for the highest score. Thank you, Ira.
Howard, pleasure.
great.
Thank you.